For some people, there's this dichotomy. You can believe in God or you can believe in science. Dave Mann from the Shining Lights Trust says, why not both? He joins us on the program. Kia ora, Dave. Nice to see you once again.
Hey, kia ora, Andrew.
Now, last time we were chatting, we were looking at the golden age of science, the birth of the scientific method, and just a bit of a recap on this one, because something that which you touched on, some people would think, oh yes, people like Aristotle and Archimedes, these are the fathers of science, but actually they were more of an obstacle than anything else when it comes to scientific method.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I mean, Aristotle had a sort of a standard Greek way of thinking, and he believed that the deductive processes of the rational mind was where truth came from.
Yeah.
However, because they believed that the gods were within the creation and the gods were the creation, you would never use manual processes to actually study a piece of matter to try and work out how it worked, because the gods might manipulate it. So he believed the planets, for example, would be pushed around in their places and their orbits by spiritual forces. And so that's Aristotelian, so from Aristotle way of thinking, actually dominated science for around about 1500 years. And the question as to the advent of a scientific age is why it was left for Christians to actually push back. And that is in the history how it happened, as Christians began to question those fundamentals, and principally because, first of all, we think God isn't in the creation. He's separate from it.
Yeah.
So when I study a piece of matter, I'm not studying God's biology, and I'm not in danger of offending God. But also just two other points that sit there. We expected design as Christians because we believed it was created rather than randomness.
Yep.
And we also believe God gave the creation to us as a gift. And so as you come into the medieval period of the 1000s, 1100s, 1200s, that was when the scientific age really began to be birthed, because Christians began to question the scientific doctrine that you weren't allowed to question.
Why don't you focus on one particular historic figure? Because I've heard it often said that you had the church on one side and you had science on the other, and that Galileo, who was an important scientist, he invented the telescope, he certainly gave us a picture of the universe that we didn't know beforehand. The common narrative is that the church opposed Galileo's findings, but you're saying, well, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I mean, the whole narrative of science versus religion is really a product of the Enlightenment period, which is sort of the 1800s in France. And what they had was all the benefits of Christianity, but they still had a corrupted Roman Catholic Church ruling their nation. And so they're like, we are so sick of this corrupted religion. I wonder if we could create an ideal society without the religion, but keeping all the benefits of Christianity.
Yeah.
So they're kind of the ones to have really begun to rewrite the script, which is what our culture has picked up on, with this silly notion that science and Christianity would be in conflict. If God created the world, the physical world can't be in conflict. To look at Galileo, what happened was he questioned standard beliefs about how the universe worked, which were essentially almost like religious doctrine to the scientific community.
Yeah.
Most science in the era was funded by the church. So when you come to a huge disagreement amongst scientists, the church gets called upon to arbitrate this increasingly emotional and intense disagreement. And so that's how you find the church at the center of it, making decisions about things it didn't understand. In that instance, the church didn't argue against science. The church simply said, well, what's the majority?
Yeah.
And the majority of scientists held one view, and Galileo was on the outside.
Yeah.
So the church endorsed that. But Galileo, he was imprisoned in a luxurious priest's home and free to continue regular life, except for being confined for a period of time as his punishment for an entirely different reason. And so the whole idea that it was a punishment for science is dishonest. The Pope was his personal friend, and he became so bold in his arguments that he started to personally criticize the Pope and malign his name behind his back.
Wow.
And you just don't do that to the Pope, who has so much power. And so he backed the church hierarchy and the Pope into a corner, and had to hand out what looked like a harsh punishment, not because of his science, but because he had disrespected the authority structure of the culture. And just to give a quick comparison, if you think he's being persecuted, being put in luxury house arrest in the home of a priest and free to continue his scientific studies, consider people who contradicted doctrinal things who were burned at the stake.
Yeah.
There's no question that he wasn't at all persecuted as far as actual persecution goes.
And honestly, those that opposed Galileo, a lot of their thinking, the majority view of the scientific community at the time, that was based on Greek archetypes and a different way of seeing the universe. So it still was faith versus a pagan worldview when we compare Galileo to the other scientists of the time in some ways.
Yeah, and I think if we bring it straight through to today, it reflects what sits inside, the dark corner of our human nature.
Yeah.
We all like to think we're rational, but we're not. You want to claim that everything made itself by chance. I mean, for a simple illustration, which I love, Holden's, are far better than Ford's. We all know this. And imagine a perfect, year 2000 or something Holden V8, and I'm tramping through, Mount Taranaki's thickest bush in New Zealand due to pest control,
Yeah.
and there's a perfect Holden V8 full of fuel with the battery charged with, a navigation system and air conditioning and heating systems and everything else going on, and I find it in the middle of the bush. I am not for one moment going to assume that a meteor must have hit the earth, caused an explosion, and everything with the metal in the ground just happened to form a perfectly formed, complex, multi-dimensional fuel systems, gear systems, the whole works. Not for a moment. And yet the simplest known human cell is billions upon billions of times more complex. Many scientists, when asked what would you compare the cell to, have said, well, it would be hardly an equivalent to the International Space Station,
Wow.
which, for those who aren't aware, is the most complex thing that human beings have yet created. So the simplest known cell is more complex than anything we've yet imagined or created. And we're supposed to believe it comes about by chance. That the point I'm making is that it's doctrine.
Yeah.
We have cultural doctrines that become our religious dogma. And the religious dogma caused by the Greeks was that the rational mind creates what's true, the physical universe isn't to be trusted, and it inhibited the scientific age. It waited for Christianity with a different worldview to challenge it, just as Christianity is challenging the Darwinian naturalistic sort of axioms or doctrines of our own times today.
And pushing back on this false dichotomy of science versus faith, and you need to pick a side on this one. Dave, thank you for the work that you are doing. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
Right, cheers, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.